Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Leverage Redemption. A great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, picking up in the kind of crappy situation they find themselves in. Obviously, most of the team is still inside of the museum. The only one outside is Brianna, and so the alarm systems are going off, everything's getting shut down, and then the group gets even more divided because Harry's with Parker and you have Sophie with Elliot. Now, what I really love is, and I love that Sophie said this, it's like, Brianna, you are Team Leverage. And so basically throughout the episode, she takes on everyone's role. At first, she's the grifters, Sophie getting close to Dunbar, ends up lifting, what was it, like his card or something off of him. I can't remember what it was. She was lifting something off of him, and very a la Parker style. Then she had to pretend to be Harry, and then she pretended to be Elliot. So I thought that was interesting. It's like, oh, did you serve? And it's like, oh yeah, like doing. I love when everyone does Elliot. They do like the gruff voice thing, and it's just like, oh, I just love that. But so I really enjoyed that for Brianna being able to kind of literally go. Because everyone on the team has dabbled in everyone else's roles to some extent. You know, like they've all kind of acquired some. They're not probably like the masters. Like obviously, no one's going to thief like Parker, but some of them, each one of them, they've all kind of become jacks of all trades while also being the masters at the things they do. Sophie's still the master grifter. Brianna's still like the master hacker and stuff like that. And Harry's probably still like considered probably like borderline like master like lawyer or something like that, weirdly enough, but you get what I'm trying to say. But what I thought was interesting though is while Sophie and Elliot were together, she ends up picking up a conversation like, what did you mean you knew he was going to do this? And he was like, right, I went to pay your buddy Billy a visit about yours and Arthur's past. And she's like, you shouldn't have done that. We don't go digging in each other's past. It's like, sometimes you kind of don't have a choice. At least with like, the greatest example that would get used is Elliot's circumstances with Damien Monroe. Because it's like, yeah, that kind of had no choice but to come up because Elliot had to do what he had to do. But that element, also kind of plays a little bit into this as well because to me, Elliot had to do that because he talks about it later on about kind of the really ins and outs of it. But essentially, the fact is, not Wilder, it's just Wild, right? Arthur used her willingness to give him a second chance, to his advantage, and because it's like, right, you were willing to forgive him. He's like, I learned from Billy how much Arthur hates you. You never did. You never really realized how much he hates you, and you were willing to give him a second chance. But this is where I was going to talk about with Elliot. Elliot's kind of like the pessimistic realist. You guys all get to be the idyllic people who get to, as he describes it, they're all walking second chances. Hardison, Parker, you, Nate, you're all walking second chances. So you're willing to give people this. But for him, it's like, I'm pessimistic. It's almost like I got to be the one, like, because his job is to protect everyone. That's his main goal. So he's always going to be looking out for things that could be used against the team and everyone individually. So it is him playing his role, and that's his role in the team. And so that's even more so why he went to see Billy. But for him, it's like, right, there is no redemption for me. Like, the fact is, I can't make up for what I've done in the past. He's done a lot of stuff he's not proud of, and it still haunts him. But at least he's like, I've come to terms with that. But this, being along this journey with you guys, being able to kind of take this trip of an adventure with you, that, and this is the role I kind of have to play, where it's like, I have to be the pessimist while you guys get to be the optimist, believing that people, but it's like, because I don't deserve a second chance, he kind of keeps a very, like, certain point of view on some of the people they come across. So I think that's such an interesting dynamic and exploration into Elliot's role in the team. And I think, when you look back on it, I think, and like I said, going back to even the Damien Monroe thing, I think it kind of plays into that very theme and element. I think it's always been a part of Elliot's story, and just like to hear him like verbally find the words to like really define that role he has, I thought was kind of really, really interesting. So at the same time that's all happening, Parker is taking Harry through his first stint through the vents, and it's like, oh, this ain't so bad. It's like, oh wow, I think you're handling this a lot better. And then he proceeds to the venties ends up sinking in, and it's like, okay. And Parker uses that to her advantage because it's like, okay, so he's gonna pass out. And there he goes. It's like, don't worry, I got smelling salts. And in actuality, this is a lot better. And he's like, you know what? I'm never getting in vents again. I love that she's explaining, like, yeah, like Hardison and Elliot want to act like, oh, the practice is so hard. Even later on, Brianna's like, yeah, it's not that hard. It's like, you know, I mean, no, I mean, I think it speaks volumes that the fact is, even all this time they've been together, that even Hardison still hates Vince despite being, you know, with Parker as long as he has been, you know, back, you know, with the, you know, just their whole thing with just OT, you know, leverage from the original series, but also like everything in between. So Harry's allowed to, you know, kind of, you know, freak out, even though it seemed like he was in control before it like really all set in. So it was quite the orchestration to kind of get them all out, to come up with the fake badges and stuff like that, what I really liked. And it's just kind of like, Sophie plays one role, then ends up, you know, they switch roles and Elliot kind of takes over as like the agent leading her down. So I was like, I love how they kind of play with that. Also, it's like, oh, MI6. It's like, huh? You know, very distinctive, like motions of like how they wrote like their how they coordinate, or at least like how they like investigate, or how they're scouring the place. He was like, it's very distinctive, you know, once again like one of Elliot's catchphrases. But Brianna playing, like I said, the role of Harry at one point in time to convince the cops to leave for a little bit so that she could get the team out. So luckily that kind of worked out on that front. But before they could leave, Sophie stops because she's like, no. Like he walked out the front door because the crown is still here. He never left it because the whole point is, hey, embarrass and humiliate me, having made it so that the crown never even left the building. So it's still here. We can do it. We can return the crown and also take down Arthur in the same way because he has to go down now. So you know, some of the team had reservations about like sticking around, but it's like, yeah, here we are again. I love later on when they're dealing with Dunbar again. They pretend to be FBI agents, and I love that. I was like, I'm surprised you just let that slip by you, but I guess it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I probably wouldn't, you know, because I only watched the movie for the first time, like all the way through, like A Silence in the Lambs, because what I was leading to was Parker pretending to be, I was like, Clarice Starling. I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, but I was like, to be fair, it's like, I've never seen the movie like all the way through until like, maybe 2021 was like the first time I think I'd ever seen the movie all the way through. I think I'd seen bits and pieces about it, but that was about it. I do love that she was doing her best, like, Jodie Foster impression, which I think is so fascinating because she's not the first one to have to do it too. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone else that's had to do it because I know, well, besides, like, obviously kind of doing it for a joke here a little bit. But the point I was making really quickly, I'm on so many tangents, I'm sorry. But I was wondering, like, well, it's like, right, if you're not that familiar with movies, you probably wouldn't remember Clarice's last name. I didn't. But I always remember just because, hello, Clarice. Like, that's it. But I never remember her last name being Starling. So it's like, you know. But the other person I was about to say who had to do like a Jodie Foster impression was Rebecca Breeds. She's an actress who played Clarice in the show Clarice on CBS. She had to do, because if I remember correctly, because I looked it up. I want to say Australian, because Rebecca Breeds is actually Australian. So, she had to not only put on an American accent, she had to put on like a Jodie Foster accent as well. So, but anyway, tangents and all that aside. I even love later on they're convincing him to kind of interrogate some of the security guards there and while Harry like sits on the keyboards and just like turns off all the cameras, I'm like, how'd you manage to press like the right key, right keys with your butt to make that happen? I love that. But also Arthur doing everything that he can. Oh my God, it also has another line I love where it's like, yeah, I thought I ran into another thief named Parker. She thinks she's my nemesis. I'm like, I love you both think that. It's like, Parker's like, I'm not her nemesis, she's my nemesis. And it's like, no, I'm not Parker's nemesis. She thinks she's my nemesis, you know? So I love that dynamic they have going on. But Arthur's the one that told her about Sophie. And this is the first time they've met in over 20 years. And, you know, obviously it's this heartbreaking and complicated situation. It's like, well, you know, it's almost interesting because let's not forget Nate and Sophie had very similar circumstances of, because like one of their past encounters we saw was when they were first introduced to each other again in season 1, where like didn't they like shoot each other at the same time or something like that. So it was almost very like Sophie has the most complicated relationship with the people closest to her always. So I think that's interesting. But I thought it was fascinating learning from Astrid that it's like, I wasn't after Ramsey, I was after you. I followed this name to this name to this name because she's like, I knew you worked for Ramsey, and then I tracked out every alias to this and that. She's like, I don't even know your real name. She's like, Sophie. I'm Sophie Devereaux. And I was like, oh, that's really... I mean, because it's like, well, we know Sophie's not her real name. At least we don't know for sure. I think that came up as a joke, too. It's like, wait, maybe Sophie is actually a real name and we're just screwing with Nate. But it's like, it's not her real name. But it is who she defined herself as for so long because who she is, who we've come to know her as is Sophie. Who she's redefined herself as from the criminal she was before to who she is now is Sophie Devereaux. So I think for her, it's like, I get to be this person. And obviously, once again, that's come with its own struggles with kind of, you know, her identity about like, who am I really? So, but it's like, oh yeah, like Sophie had brought it up last episode that she's kept an eye on Astrid. In fact, she's kind of like winked and kind of pushed and nudged her towards taking down some bad guys in the past. It's like, right, I thought you would have never, like she referenced one of those situations. She's like, right, I thought you would have never picked up on that, but luckily you did. And so it is that complicated thing of like, right, Sophie was her mother, stepmother or not. It's like, you were still important to me. And she's like, you remember the last thing you said to me? Never let anyone limit you. And you put that diamond in my hand and it was supposed to be our girls' day. And then next time I turned around, like next day you were gone. But for Sophie, it's like, I had to, like, me getting married to your dad wasn't part of the plan. That was something she did because she legitimately fell in love with him. But it's like, right, I had to cut all ties to, you know, because of Ramsey. So, and she's like, if you give me this opportunity, I will show you, like, I will return the crown to you and I will find you the real, like, person behind all of this. Just give me an opportunity, give me a chance, you know? And so at first it seems like Astrid's not giving her a chance. And Elliot shows up because she's like, oh, you think your one guy can stand up to my 5? It's like, yeah, past experience has kind of shown that hasn't been exactly the case. And this time ends up being no different. So tie her up. And eventually Arthur finds her and it's just like, oh yeah, your mom, she doesn't care about anyone, only about herself. She sent me away into prison for 20 years, you know, wrongful, like that should have been her sentence and not mine. Like, let's take her down. So they ended up finding out, and poetically enough, you're like, right, because it's Arthur. Of course, he would hide the crown in the Hanover section. Jumping ahead, like with the real crown, I was like, are we going to find out he never took it? It's been there the entire time. It's like, that's your very, like, sneaky way. Because I'm like, that's the biggest middle finger. Like, even more so than, like, hey, let's put it here below in this, you know, your deceased husband's, one of your deceased husband's, ward of this section of this museum or whatever. Yeah, let's hide the crown there. But it was a fake crown because a real crown was underneath your nose the entire time. You just didn't know it, type of thing. So they ended up retrieving the real crown, which I love that also Brianna had like drugged every one of the like cops' drinks and they were drowsy, and Elliot it's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't drink that if I were you. And I love that at one point you can see Parker dance when one of them is like, stop messing with these guys, Parker. Like, why are you doing that? So, but they end up getting caught. They all get arrested, including Harry. And Arthur's like so full on somebody like, oh yeah, whistling. It's like, oh yeah, the way you're gloating and whistling. I'm like, oh, they're about to flip the script on you. And they did, because Astrid was a part of it the entire time. It was actually her suggestions, like, tie me up tighter. He's like, it's going to cut off circulation. She's like, yeah, but he's not going to buy it if you don't sell it so tighter. And it's like, okay, it's like, you've had, I'm sure you've done this before. And Elliot's just kind of looking at Sophie being like, she's so bossy under this situation. So, but yeah, Sophie knew for a while, knew what Arthur was going to do. It was like, right, you would never take the crown, at least until after we were gone, because you were never going to take the chance. You know, it's like, right, he wouldn't want a face-to-face confrontation. It's like, right, you were going to want us out of the picture, because that way we can't like do a last-second twist on you, which we kind of already did, because we saw your twist coming a mile away. Because she's like, oh yeah, you're half decent forgery. He's like, half decent? He's like, my forgery was great. She's like, yeah, whatever. So it's like, oh, you ended up trusting her. And Astrid's like, yeah, of course I did. She's family. And I was like, oh, I was like, that's super sweet. You know? They were also able to do all this because they snuck the international team, some of the international team in. They pretended like the cops, when they shifted, they changed shifts when Brianna was telling them like, hey, like, why don't you send some of these people off early to lunch before the new shift people come in? And those new shift people were Leverage international teammates. So I was like, oh, I love how that worked out. That was so good, so sly. Once again, I always enjoy, like, obviously it's just the charm of the show where you're almost like, man, I need to go back because I want to see, did they like have the camera placed in just a way so that you can't have seen the sleight of hand, you know? But either way, Arthur gets taken down and he's like, right, there you are, go again, Sophie, like, feeling dominant, feeling better. She's like, I am better than you. I'm a better criminal and I'm a better person. She's like, yes, I should have spoke up for you 20 years ago, but I'm not responsible for the choices you made. Your life being miserable the way it is, those were your choices. And he's trying to like, oh, like, there you are thinking you're better than me. She's like, I am in every way, you know, and I'm not going to, because even, Elliot had told her earlier in the episode, you are redeemed. You're thinking you need redemption. You are redeemed. So you've done wonders with your second chance. And yet she has become a much better person, because the Sophie she was then isn't who she is now. And it's like Arthur could have made different choices, but he didn't. He got consumed by his revenge. And it's like, yes, I did things wrong, but I'm not that same person. And you couldn't let go of who you were in that moment. So it's like, yeah, now you're going to jail. And I'm not going to waste another moment like Apollo, like trying to, like, I've done my part in all of this. And I'm not going to like let you hold this up like this. I'm not going to feel guilty about this for the rest of my life. So kind of moving on from it. And Astrid's planning on putting him in the same room cell as Ramsay. So that's definitely going to be interesting, considering like, hey, everyone kind of got the payback, and Ramsay's going to get his pound of flesh, I'm sure. But also, obviously the Leverage team got to get back at him for kind of setting him up and stuff. So. But at the end of it all, Astrid and Sophie have like this wonderful moment that she's like, oh, the necklace and everything. It's like, she kept it ever since that day. And it's this sad line from Sophie where she was like, right, I saw, what was it, she saw something in Astrid. I don't remember the exact wording was. It was kind of like, you had this kind of like light to you that I never wanted anyone to extinguish. It's not that, but I'm going to keep up with that metaphor. But she's like, the one who ended up doing it was me in the long run. So that's the sad thing. I wanted to protect you from that happening, and I ended up being the cause of it. So, but Astrid says that she looked into Sophie Devereaux, and then she got a call from one James Sterling. I was like, yay! I was like, yes. I was like, we don't get to see him, but being able to, getting the name drop was still kind of nice. I was like, we have to, because he was, at least was connected to Interpol. I don't know if he's still working at Interpol after all these years or not, but he offered her a new job. It's a promotion, and she has to leave, and also might need to kind of leave any paperwork behind and kind of make that disappear. So that's pretty dope. It's like, hey, Sterling, you're still not a complete douchebag. It's like, right, he's had his major dickbag douchebag moments, but it came through in the end. So I love that. I thought that was kind of neat. Once again, it's kind of bummer we weren't able to see him, but that was kind of a nice little mention in that regard. So. And so hopefully this time they can meet up and not have to be a situation of, it being such a, oh, well, I'm going to keep an eye on you, but from afar, it's like, no, like, let's kind of keep in touch this time. And Sophie ended up returning the necklace to Astrid. So I thought that was beautiful. But when it's all said and done, they finally got to put London behind them. And it's just like, oh, God, yes, we can relax. You need to take a long break. Harry's getting ready for a job, and Parker's like, oh, don't worry about it, I already took care of that. It's like, wait, do you mean you took? She's like, no, I didn't stab anybody, but yeah, I turned down the job. He was like, no, Parker, I'm taking the job. She's like, no. He's like, I'm not a criminal. She's like, yes, you are, and that's okay. I think it's also because, like, Parker, when she gets attached to people, she doesn't want to let them go, so I thought that's what this was going to be, but still going to have to let Harry go to go his own way. But it's like, nah, you're here, you're part of the team, you're part of the squad, and there's no changing that. It's like, admit it, you also have more fun with us anyway. It's like, all right, fine, part of the team. So he's sticking around. And Sophie's like, oh, cool. So are we doing that thing where Parker talks him into saying, he's like, yeah, less talking, but sure, yeah, that's happening. So that's neat. Because I was wondering, I was like, are they legitimately just going to, like, let Harry go with the way they're setting this up? And because some people had wondered if that was going to be the case when season 1 ended, Because even Parker made a point of, like, right, you came here, became part of a team, you left, and then you came back, and you're trying to be a good guy again. But it's like, right, being a good guy is one thing, but, like, right, kind of being a good bad guy, now that's something else. Once again, bad guys make the best good guys. So, and we get word for Hardison, because I forgot. I was like, all right, completely forgot that Aldous Hodge's name did pop up in the credits. I was like, oh, yeah, he hasn't been in the entire episode. It's like, hey, guys, so I'm kind of stuck here. They actually kind of forgot about me. They have to send another rocket up. Oh, it'll be another 2 months. It's like, really? Oh, man, that's going to suck. Or, hey, hear me out. I got a plan. You guys can come and get me. And you're like, we just had a long trip. He's like, come on. Fact is, you can steal a rocket. You can be this particular role. Sophie, I know you've never had it before. So come on. And then they kind of all leave. And he's like, come on, guys. I missed the 3 latest DC movies. I don't know who's fighting who. I'm like, shut up, Aldous Hodge. Shut up. I was like, oh, you and your meta jokes. Like, oh my God, I love it. Well, to anyone that doesn't know, he was Hawkman in Black Adam. He's also Green Lantern John Stewart in an animated movie, I want to say. Because I remember, wasn't Mark Bernardin that told like a story on like Batman Beyond? Maybe it was even Black Man Beyond, where he talked about like Aldous Hodge and Phil Lamar meeting each other, because it's like, hey, one Green Lantern to another, it's like, I mean, especially both of them being John Stewart. So, that's such a great story. But so yeah, like obviously, so he has his DC connections, which I love that. So that was really interesting. But luckily the team came out. It's like, no, we got your back. Like, all right, so how are we going to go about this? Like, yeah. So that's going to be the mission. Obviously, that's going to be like completely off screen. Bummer. But yeah. At the time of me recording this, Amazon / Freevee, I mean, obviously it's all under the same umbrella, but they have not announced whether or not they're bringing Leverage back for another season. I hope they do. I mean, I just want the show to keep going. Like, and at the bare minimum, I'd like it to have like a 5-season run like the original series did, because once again, it's that show I talk about time and time again. It's like, man, I forget how much I love the show until I start watching it. Because when I rewatched it prior to the first season of Leverage Redemption, that was the first time I'd rewatched the entire series. Because I've seen the entire series like at least 3 times in totality. Technically 4, because I think there was one time I started my rewatch. I got through like most of the show, and I think I didn't finish the 5th season. I think that was like my 2nd rewatch, maybe. Because I had seen every season once originally, and then I don't remember. Either way, tangents and all that aside, I just want more of the show, and I love to see what shenanigans and adventures and jobs and circumstances and storylines we'd get next season. I'd love to see where everything would take us. So fingers crossed, hoping we do get another season of Leverage Redemption. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.